Hello, welcome everyone. We're going to give everyone just a few minutes to join us and get into the webinar. If you'd like to take a moment to drop into the chat the organization you're representing and where you're joining us from, that would be great. We'd love to know who's with us. Welcome everyone. Hello and thank you for joining us. Please take a moment to drop into the chat the name of your organization and where you're joining us from. Everyone's still coming into the Zoom. I see the numbers are still growing. Hi, Debbie. Thanks for joining us from Grass Valley. Hi, Katie. Hi, Nicole. Thank you guys for joining us. Los Angeles. Wonderful. It's great to see everybody coming in from all over the state. Hi, Alyssa. Okay, welcome everyone. Hello, and thank you for joining us. As you're joining us, please feel free to drop in the chat where you're calling in from and the organization you're representing. I want to thank everyone. We'll be walking through today the California Venues Grant application and its guidelines for for-profit and nonprofit organizations. The information provided will be available on our website and can be found in the California Venues Program and Application Guide. You'll also receive an email after this webinar with the link to the webinar as well as the information on the deck that we're presenting today. Now let's get started. I'd like to welcome Eduardo Robles from Californians for the Arts to take care of our technical details for the webinar and our land acknowledgement. Welcome, Eduardo.
Thank you, Tara. Hi, everyone. Closed captioning is being provided solely for the convenience of our viewers. Captions are visually displayed over the video, which benefits people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and anyone who cannot hear the audio due to noisy environments. If you would like to disable this feature, at the bottom right-hand side of the Zoom window, there is the live transcript button. Please click this button, then select Hide Subtitle to close the closed captions. This webinar is being recorded. For those that are unable to attend a live webinar or need to refer to content while completing their application, partner sites have made similar recordings available for your reference. As we begin this webinar, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. A land acknowledgement is a critical step towards working with Native communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and homelands. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We honor and are grateful for the land we occupy and recognize the ongoing damage of settler colonialism. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I am on the traditional territory of the Chumash people. I encourage you to name and acknowledge the Native peoples where you are located in the chat box. The chat box will be closed after the land acknowledgement. The Q&A box will remain open for outstanding questions.
Thank you, Eduardo. As Eduardo mentioned, the Q&A box will be open throughout the webinar for your questions. I encourage you to use the Q&A box now and throughout the webinar to put your questions in. We have representatives from Lendistry, Tina Pelzer is with us today, and Sue Sigler is with us from Cal Nonprofits, and they will be helping to address the Q&A box throughout the webinar. Tina Pelzer will also be addressing the tech tips and the questions as they arise in the Q&A. Californians for the Arts. Next slide, please, Eduardo. Californians for the Arts is a small but mighty nonprofit supporting 15,000 subscribers and a membership base representing thousands of artists and arts and cultural organizations. We take on opportunities that no single organization or artist can represent alone. We are the ongoing part of the public dialogue that the arts are a critical component of our lives and of our communities. We advocate for arts resources and policies that benefit all Californians. Our work impacts every community across the state. California arts advocates actively advocated for a reopening plan, allowing for arts and culture at its full capacity. We thank everyone for taking action on our alerts and for working with our elected officials. On behalf of Julie Baker, our executive director, I want to strongly encourage everyone to apply for the California Venues Grant. We're in the process of advocating with the state, with the Small Business Administration, and with Lendistry to ensure that we have the grant represented in the spirit it was intended. So we need you to apply so that we can advocate on your behalf. If you could do that, that would be wonderful. Also, we'd love for you to share this information with any of your constituents. Next, there we go. Effective advocacy is collective and consistent. It is critical to the field that all events and venue entities know about this funding and opportunity and take advantage of it. Please share this information with your constituents. Now we're going to move into the overview of the grant itself. Next slide, please, Eddie. So first and foremost, I want to let you all know that this is not a first come, first served grant, and that the grant is now open and will be open until November 19th at 5 p.m. The other thing I want to let you know is that I'm going to be addressing a lot of information in this webinar. Some of it can be confusing. That's primarily because we are still working out some details and getting some clarity on some direction for you. If you have any questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. The last slide of the webinar will be my contact information. The main thing I want to let you know is that you must start the grant and put in as much information as you can, as much of your documentation as you can, and save the grant. Some of you are going to come and say to me, I don't yet have my 2020 taxes, so I don't know if I should start. Yes, you should start. Because if you start the grant and you save it, then after the 19th, once it's closed, you'll still have the ability to upload any remaining documents that are necessary. If you don't start the grant, you will not have that ability. So please, above all else, start. On the program overview, a couple highlights I want to make. You must have a physical address and operate in the state of California, and this will be validated on your tax returns. The grant award you're eligible for is the lesser of either $250,000 or 20% of your gross earned income in the 2019 taxable year. Getting a lot of questions around what is gross earned income. It's income that you earn that generates programming. So if you're paid by the city of Los Angeles to execute programming, that is earned income. If you get a donation, that is not. If anyone has any questions about how to calculate gross earned income, I'm happy to speak with you privately. Feel free to drop me an email. You must complete a new and separate application. The other thing I'm getting a lot of questions about is if we got the SFOG, or if we got the CRG, or if we got any other COVID relief related grant, are we eligible for this grant? The answer is yes. These grants are completely separate and non-related. The only thing you need to know is that if you did get the California Small Business Relief Grant, then whatever amount you were awarded for that grant will be deducted from your total award should you receive a California Venues Program grant. Next page, please. So we start on the application. Again, you must get in, start a web application through the Lendistry portal. I'm going to go right through the application itself so you'll see that, but you're going to have an opportunity to upload documents. You're going to go through some selections and validation. I cannot stress enough how important it is that you begin the application. At the end of one of the last things you'll do at the application is it will ask you to link to your bank account through the portal with Plaid. I get a lot of questions about that. A lot of people are concerned about fraud. I understand those concerns. There are alternative verification methods. I'm happy to discuss those with you if you have any concern. Next, we're going to get into the eligible venue. To be an eligible venue, you must have a defined performance and audience space. You must have mixing equipment, a public address system, and a lighting rig. You must engage one or more individuals to carry out at least no less than 2 of the following roles. You can see those roles there: promoter, stage manager, box office, things like that. If you are a nonprofit that is providing free events and programming, and this is quite common, these events must be produced primarily by people that are paid employees and not volunteers. Then we get into the eligible independent live event. There's a variety of entities that are eligible. You can see them listed here: sole proprietor, C Corp, S Corp, LLC, 501c3, all of these are eligible. If you have any questions, please reach out. Quite directly, what I would say is that unless it says you can't, I would consider moving forward. You must have been in operation by June 1 of 2019. You must be currently active and operating or have a clear plan to reopen. We're going to then get into the eligible independent live event. Now, on this grant, the way the legislation is written is these 5 NAICS codes are the codes that have been approved. If your organization or your entity comfortably fits within one of these NAICS codes, please select the code that you comfortably fit within for your application. It does not matter if you have used a different code for a different application or a different code for your taxes. As long as you comfortably fit within this, Lendistry understands that they will be taking the time to review your application. And as long as it's, you're not putting down that you're a full service restaurant when in fact you are a tap dancer, no stretches like that, you should be just fine. So as long as it's comfortable, go forward. Then we want to look at the principal businesses and activities. You must organize, promote, manage, produce, host events. It goes into details: comedy shows, theater events. You must charge a cover charge ticketing at the front door. Performers must be paid. You must earn at least 70% of your gross earned revenue. That's not your total revenue, it's earned revenue on ticket sales, production fees, production reimbursement, or sales of beverages, merchandise. So I bring this up because a lot of times we are getting funding to do productions. Okay, we're getting some funding through the city, we're getting some funding through other methods, and that counts. It's not just the ticket sales. So I want to make sure everyone knows that. Next page, please. Ineligible businesses. A couple of things I want to bring up that are specifically important to nonprofits. You must be a nonprofit registered 501c. This specifically means that, unfortunately, if you're a fiscally sponsored nonprofit, you do not qualify for this grant. Again, you must have a physical presence in the state of California. And then you must be able to demonstrate that you have at least a 70% decline in your gross earned revenue. Again, it's earned revenue between 2019 and 2020 for quarters 2, 3, and 4, as those are the quarters impacted by COVID. I want to let you know that grants will be prioritized on the percentage of this gross revenue decline between 2019 and 2020. We're going to move on to the eligible uses of the funds. First thing I want to let you know is that this is a retroactive grant. It is effective as of March 2020 to date. I'm imagining it will go at least through the time in which people receive their funding, if not slightly beyond. So if you've paid out of pocket or you've gone into your reserve account to pay your employees, to pay your rent, you can use this funding to reimburse yourself and then have a liquid cash flow. This funding will cover employee expenses, payroll, healthcare benefits, insurance. As we all know, employees' expenses are our greatest expense. It will cover rent, utilities, any costs associated with reopening. And there's a wonderful line that says any other COVID-related expenses. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. At this point, there are no reporting specifics. Our advice is that you keep your receipts in case there is a request by the state for some reporting to show how you use these expenses. Now we're going to go directly into the application itself. When you go to the Lendistry portal, you're going to click Start Application. You're going to put in your email address, you're going to put in your phone number, and it's going to create some login credentials for you. It's going to be using an SMS text system, and it's going to be sending you codes. Every time you go to log in, you're going to want to do this. This is for security purposes. We recommend that as much of your documentation as you gather that all, you have it ready, you have it in front of you. If you do that, this application should take you no more than about 2 hours. It's pretty straightforward. Then we're going to go on to the owner details. A couple things I want to let you know. When it's talking about owners, if you happen to be a nonprofit, it's talking about the person that is listed on your statement of information with the Secretary of State as the signature for your nonprofit. You're going to want to make sure that this is up to date. And then whoever that is, there will be a soft credit check pulled. That will not affect their credit rating. It's simply to make sure that we're in adherence with the codes for the federal and state funding and to ensure there is no fraud activity. Many people have questions about that. I get a lot of concerns about it. It is required, and again, it will not impact their credit rating. Under percentage of ownership, as we know, nonprofits are not owned. So if you are a nonprofit, you would put 0. If you're a for-profit, you would put the percentage as appropriate for that applicant. And then under referral partner, you would put, in this case, Californians for the Arts. And you want to make sure that you keep your password at hand. The other thing I want to bring up is that you cannot use PO boxes on this application. You must click the little box that says, I accept SMX text policies. You want to make sure that the email address you're using is one that you are going to be checking regularly. And you also want to make sure that the phone that you put in here is one that you're going to be checking regularly, because you will be receiving communication from Lendistry. And if you're not responding after a certain period of time, they will put your application aside. And we don't want that. On the next part, we're going to go into the business information part 1. It's going to ask you for your legal business name. You're going to want to put that in there. And then if you have a DBA, you would type that in on the right-hand side. If you do not have a DBA, you do have to type in N/A, not applicable. Again, you cannot use a PO box. And then under the drop-down menu, it's going to ask you, are you a nonprofit or a for-profit? Please ensure that you select the appropriate selection. If you are a nonprofit and you select for-profit, your application will not be valid, and vice versa. So please make sure that you select for-profit or nonprofit as appropriate. Under business entity type, you'll select from the drop-down menu your entity type, and then you need to put in the date your business was established. Again, it must be prior to June 1, 2019. Under business URL, if you have one, you would put that in there. If you have one, they will be wanting to look at it, so that would be great. If you do not, you do have to type in N/A. You cannot leave any of the spaces blank. We're going to go into business information part 2. When they ask you for the purpose of the grant, you can select any of the approved expenditure purposes. You can select payroll, you can select rent, and you can select payroll today. And then should you be awarded and receive your funding, if at that time you decide, you know what, actually my payroll is good, I need this for rent, that is not a problem. As long as it's approved expense, you can feel free to do that. You'll put in the amount requested. Now, this is coming up a lot right now for our nonprofits. As you know, many nonprofits have a different fiscal year than a calendar year. In order to assure that we are comparing apples to apples for the purposes of this grant, we are comparing calendar year 219 to 220. So when you ask for the amount requested, you're going to put in your calendar year 2019, either the 250 or the 20%, which either is the lesser of those two. Under the annual gross receipts, as you see, that must match your 219 tax returns. And then they're asking you about, will this application create jobs? You can say yes or no. Now, when you go into the number of full-time employees and part-time employees, the state is trying to gather some data about how COVID impacted employment. So they want to know, as of January of 2020, how many full-time employees and how many part-time employees did you have? And as of December of 2020, how many jobs were created or how many jobs were retained? So that's what they're wanting to know. We go into the next page, which is our demographics. Now, an important thing I want to let you know is this first question, when you select if you're business to business or business to client, this is directly tied to the drop-down menus of the following three questions. If you happen to be in the arts and you are a nonprofit, you're going to want to select business to business, service business, professional, and arts. Otherwise, you can play with those drop downs and see if you can find the right category. Also, if you feel the need to select unknown, Lendistry understands that these are nonprofits and you might not fit into any of these categories. Then we're going to, under the NACES code, you got to put in one of the 5 that's approved that you comfortably fit into. The rest of these are demographic questions for your ownership or for your organization. If you are a nonprofit, what our recommendation is that you take the gross or the medium of all of your board and all of your staff to answer the following demographic questions. If you're a private business, you would answer that based on the owner. And we go into disclosures. Now, these disclosures are going to be answering the questions of the qualifying eligibility factors. So it's really just going right down each one and saying yes or no. You know, do I have a promoter? Do I have a stage manager? Those kind of things. So answer those accurately for your entity, and then you'll be on the right track. Then we go over into this opportunity we have for the application before submitting. Next page, please. And on this, this is great because it gives you a few opportunities that are wonderful. One, as I mentioned a few times, you can save it and come back to it later. The other is if you have some edits, you can have an opportunity to edit it. Now, I do know, because I've heard from a couple of people, that we have a few technical glitches where we're not being able to go back to our gross revenue and a few other pages. Lendistry is working on those. I hope to have those resolved soon. If by some chance they are not resolved by November 19th, my recommendation is that you type up a PDF explaining exactly what was your gross revenue, what is the amount you should be entitled to, and you attach that with the rest of your documentation. And then if everything is ready to go and you're ready to submit, you hit everything is good and continue. And you would be put into the awaiting selection process. If you don't go into the awaiting selection process and it says incomplete, it means that you need to go back, edit your application, and you have not completed all things. Now, I'd like to welcome Tina Peltzer. She's going to go into our tech tips on the next page. You're muted, Tina.
There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So I do have an answer to help with the last slide as far as editing. When you get to the bottom of the application, and it's not here on this slide, but when you get through the whole application, there's a button that says review, and you're able to go back into the other parts of the application to edit for things like if you put in a different number or address, things like that. But it doesn't happen until you get to the end. Just be sure to not click submit before doing that. And we will update the slides for you, Tara, to show that. But just so that you guys know, you do have an opportunity to edit, but it won't be until the end of the application. As you're doing your application, one of the #1 rules that we like to follow is to use the Google Chrome search engine, because it is the best way to actually get through the application. When using Google Chrome to apply, you want to keep these three things in mind. You want to clear your cache, you want to use incognito mode, and you want to make sure you disable the pop-up blocker. And we'll go into detail as to what that means. Clearing the cache actually is just the data that you previously had in your browser. Sometimes it enables the pop-up blockers. It'll enable you to see things clearly, and it captures too much data, so you want to clear that out. The incognito mode actually helps you to enter the information privately and prevents it from being remembered. So that's a safe mode. And then the pop-up blocker is where you, when you get to the end of the application, you'll see the things that come up that are like, everything is good, continue. Those pop-ups happen, but if your blocker is on, it will enable you from seeing those things to move on with your application. How to clear your cache, next slide. How to clear your cache. In your settings, you'll go up in the settings in the upper right-hand corner, and you're gonna click on the 3 dots. And once you click on those 3 dots, you're gonna go to settings, and then you're gonna go to privacy and security. And then you're gonna select clear browsing data. And then you're gonna actually select the ones that you wanna clear. In some cases, depending on how you save your data, you would wanna go back probably about a few days just to kind of clear that history and clear the data, and you should be all set. Next page. How to enable your incognito mode. Again, at the 3 dots at the upper right corner of your web browser, you're going to then select New Incognito Window. Your browser will open to a new window, and that will allow you to actually clear things out. It goes alongside with the clearing your cache, and you'll be able to safely put in your application. Next page. How to disable your pop-up blocker. And remember, this is a big one because those pop-ups come up throughout the application that'll help you to move forward. You're gonna go into your window, and again, those 3 buttons are your friend up at the top when you're browsing in Google Chrome. You're gonna click the settings, and then you're gonna go down again for privacy and security, and then you're gonna select pop-up and redirect. You're gonna actually click it to be allowed as opposed to blocking. And you'll see it switch from blocked to allowed in blue, and then that'll enable your pop-up blockers to come up so that you can complete the application. And we're gonna go back to Tara for the document preparation.
Actually, you've got 2 more slides, Tina.
Oh, do I? Okay, let's go. All right, here we go. Thank you. So preparing your documents. All right, so in preparing your documents, you wanna make sure that you have your documents in PDF format. All right, as you can see here, all documents are in PDF format. And what that means is they're in a secured file that no one's able to change. If they're in JPEGs, like pictures or images, those files don't come up properly. As you can see, here's some samples for the correct way it should look versus the incorrect way. So you want to make sure they're straight up and down. And if you need some support with that, definitely ask for some help. And I'm quite sure our great partners might be able to help with that, but make sure it's in PDF format. Another helpful hint with this is as you are collecting your documents and you're putting them in PDF format, it might be helpful to put them all in one file and label and name them so that they're easily accessible. Some of the apps that might help with this are on the Genius Scan and the Adobe Scan. We provide links there that'll be able to help you get it, whether you're on an Apple or an Android. So these things are listed on the website as well as in the guidelines for your help. Also remember, some of the file sizes might be large. I know some of the tax documents and the other documents have several pages. So just remember to make sure the file sizes are at 15 megabytes. And remember, the special characters in the names sometimes are not acceptable. So try to make sure you use letters when you have the file names. And a big deal with the taxes, especially some accountants do this for security and safety reasons, they're password protected. So if you have files or taxes or things that are password protected, you're able to upload them. Just make sure when the pop-up comes up that says the password, put that password in there that allows our processors to see the actual file. And if there are any issues with that, we'll call to say, hey, or reach out to say, hey. And again, with this, just make sure, you clear your cache and do the clear the pop-up blockers. Next slide. So make sure you use a valid email address. Info@ is a big one, and @contact and @no reply. Those are ones a lot of organizations use sometimes. Those email addresses will not be acceptable in the system. So it'll seem like it has gone through, but we will have not gotten it on our end. So please make sure that you have an email address that is valid and goes directly to the person that is doing the application. Keep in mind the 3 that are listed here. And if that does happen, let's say you have an info@ and you accidentally put it in, call the call center and say, hey, I really need to update my email address, and they'll be able to change it and adjust it for you. It's also a fraud protection so that we make sure that we're connecting with the right person.
Thank you, Tina. Next slide. Wonderful. Now we're going to get into uploading documents. At the very end, when you're finished everything, it's going to ask you to start uploading your documents. So it's going to request your government issued ID. Most people use a driver's license, your 2019 tax returns, your 2020 tax returns. Again, if you don't have those yet, you can upload those later. And then your interim financial statements for quarters 2, 3, and 4, both for 19 and 20. If you're a nonprofit, you'll include your tax exemption letter, and then any corporation entity documents that are required will be loaded there. And once that's done, you'll see it as submitted, everything's done, and you'll know it's ready to go. Next page, please. When we get into the required documentation, everything does have to be in a PDF form. If you're for business, you're doing your federal in California, you can use anything at 120, 1040, 1065. For California, the 100, 565, 540. And then for federal, if you're a nonprofit, you use your 990, and for California, 199. Again, I want to reiterate that we are looking at fiscal year versus calendar year. One of the things I'm recommending to nonprofits, because the application is not asking for this, is that they create a spreadsheet showing what does your calendar year look like versus what does your fiscal year look like. Because as we know, for most nonprofits, that's going to be significantly different, and it's going to directly impact the amount of funding you are eligible to receive. You want to make sure you have all your official Secretary of State documents updated and ready for this, because they are going to be required. All right, and that's also how they're going to know that you have been in business via the Secretary of State prior to June 1, 2019. Next page, please. One of the things you're going to be uploading is your application certification. This is the second opportunity for you to ensure that you are selecting either for-profit or nonprofit as applicable for your entity. So make sure that you look at that document. When you print it, it's actually going to say right at the top, for-profit or nonprofit. And you want to make sure that that information is correct, and you upload the appropriate application certification for your entity based on your status. In order to get this, you can, next page please, you can print this out right at the application page, initial it, sign it, scan it, PDF it, and then upload it. That tends to be the easiest way that I've seen people doing it. Next page please. We get into the final page of your connection with Plaid for your financials. You go in, you continue to Plaid, you locate your banking institution. Not all of them are there, but the vast majority are. You sign into your bank, and then you confirm permission. Again, if for any reason this concerns you, there is a workaround, and we can discuss that. Next, we're going to go to the application statuses. I want to make sure and let you know that you will be able to log into the portal and check the status of your application at any time. Again, if it says incomplete, you need to go back in and edit something. Something is not done there. Most applications, once completed and submitted, will say awaiting selection process. That's where you should be. After November 19th, once the application window ends, applications will begin being selected. The next step would be in review pending validation. That means that an actual entity or person, a human at Lendistry, has pulled your application and reviewing it. They're reviewing all the documentation you've added and everything. They very well may contact you directly. They may contact you via email, via call, via text. Please check your spam. Please be on the lookout for these communications. They might ask for additional supporting documents. Please provide it to them. If for some reason you're not selected because you're deemed ineligible, it will say not selected. If you strongly disagree with this, please contact myself or Sue or whoever your partner is, and we will look at it with you. We will check with our Lendistry manager or partner and make sure that everything's good. If you haven't uploaded all of your documents and it's been more than 60 days, let's say you're a nonprofit that doesn't need to file your 220 taxes until January or later, then once you get those taxes, you're going to want to upload them and you're going to want to reactivate your account. We do this by contacting Lendistry. They reactivate your account, you upload your documents, and then it immediately goes into the awaiting selection process. Of course, the sooner you get that done, the more likely that you can be awarded something before the funds expire, because there's a limited amount of funds. So if you have any way to speed up your process to get your taxes done, I strongly encourage you to do that. And I think the last page, there we go. Here's my contact information here. Here's the contact information for the call center. They are open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. I am available via email, via phone. I am often on the phone, but I will always call you back within 24 hours. That's my goal. So please do leave a message. And let's see, do we have any questions in the Q&A box that we need to address? Or Sue, did any questions come up that you saw patterns of, or anything that you've seen as we've gone through applications that you want to bring up as a Q&A?
Tara, I think that we were able to answer all of the questions in the Q&A box. So thanks to the people who put them there.
Wonderful. Okay. I think I covered in the webinar all the main Q&A things that I've seen as I've gone through applications around calendar versus fiscal, around saving documents. Anything else, Sue, that you can think of that's been a common question?
I think that one of the more common questions that we get is, can I use these funds to open a new venue? And I think we would stress that, as you mentioned, Tara, that you had to have been in business prior to June 1st, 2019, that the funds are intended to help venues and events that were in existence prior to COVID make it through COVID time. So it's not a program for startups or new programs.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Tina, is there any question that you've seen on the Lendistry side that's been very common or very repetitive that you think is worth bringing up here?
The only one that I think we already talked about was getting through the application and just making sure that you use the different browsers and things, but also the fact of being able to edit. That has been a big one from all partners, as we are, technically making sure things are okay on our side. You do have that ability, but it's at the bottom. So that's been the most common.
Okay, thank you. There is one question in the chat. As a nonprofit, is it required to have a promoter, stage manager, like a venue? Are all of those venue requirements applied to nonprofits, like a museum? Would either one of you like to take that? Yes.
Sure. There was a list of positions that you need to have, and stage manager was one of those, but you'll note in the list of those positions, you only have to have 2 or more. So you do have to have professional paid staff in some of those roles. And yes, organizations need to meet all of the requirements.
And if I understand correctly, you could have somebody that does both roles, but it's one person.
That's true too, yeah.
Oh, looks like we have a couple other questions here. What is the time frame for expenses covered by this grant? As of March 2020, current. So there is no, we haven't been told you can only spend this, by X date, but it is entitled to cover COVID expenses and or reopening. So I feel comfortable saying through the time of award. I don't know how much, I don't know, Tina, do you know if there's a definitive date on that yet?
There isn't, and that's also another common question. I'm glad someone asked that. There isn't a definitive date. It really is open from the time of business, and like Sue was saying, funds need to be allocated to recovery from COVID-19 relief, but there is no time limit on when you have to spend the funds.
Yeah. Looks like there's one more question. Do you want to cover that one, Sue?
Yes, the question is, do museums qualify for this grant? And the answer is, it probably depends. If the museum can meet all of the qualifications, but we should note that the qualifications do require that that the organization produces concerts, comedies, sports, all of those activities that are covered as a principal business activity. So if it's not the principal business activity of the organization, then it's possible that organization might not qualify.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think if they have any clarifying questions, they could always reach out to myself or to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Eduardo, would you put the final slide up so everyone has our contact information, please? Looks like there might be another. Our
this
staff,
is a question that we get often about, because many nonprofits might use volunteer staff in certain positions, or and so it says the staff are volunteered but are paid on a fee basis. So I would count those staff as paid rather than volunteers. And there's definitely a requirement that performers be paid. So if your actors are paid, then I would say, yes, you are eligible.
Yes, I would agree 100%. I would say err on the side of application.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. All right. It only takes 2 hours of your time. The amount of the award is definitely worth that amount of time. So if I can stress nothing else, it's if you can meet the qualifications, please apply. And please share this information with any of your constituents that you think might benefit from it. All right. If there's nothing else, I don't see any other Q&A. I'm going to wrap it up for today. I want to thank Eduardo and Sue and Tina for joining us today, and thank all of you for joining us. We appreciate your time and your attention. Have a wonderful day.